Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I'm seeing a tree trunk.
Awesome. Okay. Let me just I just use an iPhone app called Tides Near Me. It's free. It's very easy. You can intuitively look at various tide readers or stations all over the place in the United States, and that allows you to get a sense of what the tide is going to be today, but also tomorrow, the next day, and you can kind of get an idea a few days in advance. And there's always, a 50 to an hour increment shift backwards or forwards in the day. You'll see high tide at 5 p.m. one day and then 6 p.m. And that's just, I can't speak into the science. My my astrophysics are way behind me at this point, but all of it has to do with the moon and the tides. And then sometimes there's super high tides and super low tides, and that's a whole different story here. But that very much could be correlated with this. But basically, the big shorebird flights are directly correlated with high tide in the afternoon in the Delaware Bay, and that's when you're going to get just explosions. And it has to be at the right time of year, obviously, too. Um, I'm curious if uh sure enough. Great. Let me just pull this up. You can see this. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's working.
Great. So this is Tides Near Me. I didn't realize they had a web app, but they totally do. Um, and for me, I just look at one of my favorite places to look for shorebirds, which is just a little bit south of Bombay Hook. Of course, when I click on the thing, it takes me back up. It's Mahone River entrance, which is Port Mahone Road. Jeff knows it super
Oh
well.
man, yeah.
Yeah, Port Mahone Road is a great place. So there's a crud ton of shorebirds that go through there. Spring and fall. Sometimes the impoundment there is higher, sometimes it's lower, but you're gonna often see if you look on the beach, you can find lots of horseshoe crabs around there. And they're from DuPont Nature Center. Which is a huge shorebird concentration area in the Delaware Bay. You can just see ginormous numbers of dowitchers. And we're talking, you'll go up to DuPont Nature Center and see 8,000 dowitchers and 4,000 dunlins. So just tons of shorebirds. And it's the same story across the Delaware Bay. But I digress. Of course, we're getting an ad. This is just what I wanted to see. Okay. Yeah. So today you're going to see the Port Mahone Road area, and to the north of it is Bombay Hook, which is another area that's just loaded with shorebirds in migration. High tide is 2:55, but you can see when you keep going a couple days, for instance, on Tuesday, high tide is a little before 5 p.m. And there's a 2 hour window roughly on each side of that where the beach is just not really going to be exposed, and a lot of the shorebirds are going to be in their high tide roosts. And if I'm a shorebird and I can't get fat, I can't feed up on migration, I have no reason to stay. I'm just gonna bounce, which is why you get these giant flights at high tide. Basically, they can't red knots, which have to feed up on various things on the low tide flats, just can't do that. So they think, oh, I'm just gonna make a run for it. Um, and that has to be on a good day. June 3rd is a great time of year for red knots and turnstones. And you can see that looking at the eBird bar charts for Chester County. You can see that's still very much in the window for when red knots and turnstones move. Whimbrels are kind of a late May thing. And throughout all of this, they're dunlins and dowitchers and things like that. But you're basically, you know that at some point during the window of kind of the last week of May, first week of June, you're going to get few moments where they're going to be super high tides or just high tides, and the birds are going to take off at the right time. If that makes sense.
So you want to see the high tide lining up late afternoon to early evening
Yep.
on a night when the winds are helping them fly north, so out of the south.
Yeah, if there's a light southeast wind too, I think that's when Jeff got that ginormous flight the other day. Was just light, clear skies, light southeast winds, high tide around now. That just created a ginormous flight.
And
And
5 days of northwest winds before it, which didn't hurt.
yeah, for sure. And that's just basically the shorebirds are just going to bottle up and eat horseshoe crab eggs and just get fat because they're going to need to do that before they go to the Arctic. Um, So yeah, exactly. That helps. Although it's interesting, you do get flights on days when the tides are not optimal. Yesterday or the day before there were quite a few shorebirds moving at dusk that were detected in southeastern Pennsylvania. And then the following day, there was a very large fallout in Hunterdon County at a reservoir. It's a great vagrant spot too. But you saw all of the shorebirds we were talking about, red knots, turnstones, whimbrel, dowitchers, dunlin, all just crashed into this lake, basically because they ran straight into a thunderstorm. So birds do take off at weird times. The tides were not great that day. The winds were okay. They were coming from the southwest. But there's what I'm saying is that in this whole window, there are trickles of shorebirds almost every night that they can fly, if that makes sense.
Makes
They want
sense.
good conditions, but they got to get to the Arctic at some point. You know what I mean? Like they can't wait until
Yeah.
July for good winds.
Yeah, especially with things like whimbrels, which have such a pretty short takeoff window, in the spring at least. Certainly in the fall, you can actually see whimbrels moving as early as July south along the ocean. If you just go to the ocean, you'll see them going south. But yeah, these birds have such a short window; they'll go into adverse circumstances occasionally. Is the gist for it. And then for your question of looking for when to look for these birds, I mean, one way to do it is if you go to Red Knot and then go to Kent County, Delaware, you're going to see there's a huge window where the birds cluster up in the second week of May, and that just peters off. And then once you're into the second week of July of June, rather, it just drops off. This is the big kind of concentration, and that lines up nicely with let's do. Oh, of course, red knot doesn't really get detected in Center County, but let's do Chester County. Perfect. There's the window. So it's right around the same time is when you see these big shorebird flights. You can see in the photos below. June 4th, second week of May, first week of June is the window when these birds are taking off, basically.
And look, we know all those names.
Oh yeah, yeah, some famous names here. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
real
it's crazy because these birds go over people's houses. This is
yeah.
Zach Bear's just right over his house in Downingtown. And I my wife and I purchased this house that I'm sitting in right now last September, and I've just been surprised. Two of the three nights I've intentionally gone out, there have been shorebirds that fly right over my house, and it's kind of baffling. I'm right by Valley Forge National Historic Park, and if you look at the eBird window uh, for where these birds fly, I might be a little bit on a tangent here.
No, I think the geographic piece is worth adding.
Well,
Yeah.
Right.
I have Google Maps pulled up too for the geographic
Yeah.
stuff.
So this is kind of where you see the big purple concentration of where knots concentrate in the Delaware Bay. Down at the DuPont Nature Center, also in Cumberland County, New Jersey, you can get huge numbers of them. So this is the staging area. And then if you look north, you're going to see the sightings in southeastern Pennsylvania occur over this little triangle where the birds are taking off from. And this is something I've thought about a lot, which is just that you have to think about it kind of like um, the birds aren't going to always fly in the same flight path. There can be diversions here and there, but a lot of the sightings occur kind of in this triangle that shoots up from Marcus Hook, New Jersey, over to Kennett Square, and then northbound to Phoenixville and Downingtown. And that's kind of a big funnel of where the shorebirds are going. Um,
Yeah, the
and
one night I tried last year, well, I'm in Phoenixville, like right on the Schuylkill. The one night I tried last year, I had like 50 ready turnstones. So that was pretty cool.
yeah, I think actually you would get a shocking number of shorebirds if you set up at
Right.
Valley Forge, and people have done
Yeah.
this and found
Yeah,
quite
so the
a
Monco.
very
So
large.
the Monco cruise sets up shop.
Yeah, I don't know if there are any other ridge lines in this part of the county, but I'm at 500 feet right here, and there's a ridge that parallels Valley Forge. But it would be shocking to see how many shorebirds actually are going over this part of the county. I think it's quite a lot.
It's
Um,
interesting that that upper left pin there near Morgantown, that's Elverson there, and that's at like 900 feet. And there's a ridge right there. Yeah, it's Great Marsh.
Yeah, so that's a modus detection. I know this record. You can see it right here. So these birds definitely
Cool.
have a pretty big
Yeah,
flight path in Chester County. Um, it's interesting to see just looking through the eBird records. You can see, as I was saying, lots of people just in their backyards. All you
yeah,
have to do is kind of step outside and look at the right time, and you're going to get ruddy turnstones, which
yeah.
is just it's wild. Chad Hutchinson was telling me the other day about how he got
Yeah.
300 turnstones over his backyard, and a whole bunch of other shorebirds. So it's what I'm saying is you don't actually have to be in these optimal spots, but certainly in Kennett Square is where you're going to get the big sky view, and that's where you're going to get the huge numbers, which is kind of what Jeff is, I think, going to talk about.
Yeah. Do you want me
Good
to jump in?
transition.
Oh, you want me to jump in?
Yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
Well, let me, where is this? There we go. It's my first day on the internet. Can you guys see my screen?
It's
I
coming
see
to
a
life.
black screen currently.
Yeah. It's
There
there.
we go.
Yeah.
So here
Parking
is
deck.
our parking garage in southeastern Chester County in Kennett Square in the heart of mushroom country. Kennett Square is the mushroom capital of the world. If you didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
So
I
if
knew
you
it
look
was
here,
big.
it's the mushroom capital of the world. So if you zoom out here, the pin there is our parking garage. And if you like listening in your county, which I do, this is a good spot because here's actually the state line. So you can't get too much farther closer to Delaware in Pennsylvania than that parking garage. And it's 4 floors up and you have a 360 view. And as we're going out here, here's what Ben was just talking about. Like here's the Delaware Bay right here. And a lot of the birds are my slow internet. Let's go. As we all know, the birds are headed up here. And come on, man. So here's the Delaware Bay, here's Kennett Square, and here's where a lot of these birds are heading. And if you'll notice, that's a straight line. So we've kind of been trying to perfect this the last couple years. We used to try, there's other spots we've tried. We've had mixed results. Some nights been pretty good, some nights been pretty rough, kind of like birding in general. We started, I think Ross, of course, it was Ross's idea for the parking garage last year. This is the one this year. So this was our best night last year. And usually the birds start coming through about 7:30. And it's kind of like, everybody's just kind of screwing around. We might have like 5, 10, 3, 15 people up there. And you kind of just having fun. You don't see everybody too much. We usually get kites a couple times a year doing this, which is pretty cool. I don't know why we get so many Mississippi kites in southeastern Pennsylvania. I have no idea where they're going. Nobody's found a nest anywhere in Pennsylvania yet. There's not too many that go north of us, but this same time of year as the shorebirds, you get like 20, 30, 40 kites reported in these counties. I would love to know where they're going. But a lot of times between like 6 and 8, we'll get a kite or two. I think we had one last year doing this. Yeah, Mississippi kite. Doesn't even, it's so like normal, it like barely even gets a note. Like it's such a weird thing down here. And that's usually early. And then about 7:30, everybody starts looking for the shorebirds and start scanning. And then eventually somebody yells shorebird. So this is one of our better nights last year. As you can see, we kind of tracked the flock numbers by time. We had over 2,000 this night last year, and this was May 25th. And then we did have some that were identifiable. This black-bellied plover flock, I remember specifically because we were all looking at a distant flock. And then somebody goes, I hear black-bellied plovers. And like somebody looked straight up and they were coming right over us low enough to hear, which was very cool. Had turnstones. That one killdeer was probably a local. And red knots, which I think was a county or state bird for everybody in the group. And if you look through these, like the pictures, the pictures can vary. But I really like these big flock pictures, and I don't think it's gonna let me zoom on this, but like these are pretty identifiable as red knots. You can see those real long wings. Yeah, like we get some of these massive looking flocks, and it's really cool to watch. I always tell people I used to think that people were making it up that you could tell like snow goose versus Canada flock just by looking at the flock, the size and the shape. And I used to always think that was nonsense, but like, of course that's true. Like, and you can actually do that with some of the shorebirds too. The whimbrel like to be in like straight lines or in V's, and the whimbrel seem to fly by themselves. They think they're better than the other shorebirds, I believe. I'm not sure what it is, but we had quite a few red knots this night last year. And the other thing that's really cool is, and there's none on here. So I'll jump over to our best night from this year. This happened this past Monday. Ben alluded to it with the conditions. We had like 4 or 5 days in a row of northwest winds. And then all of a sudden we had really nice conditions after everybody was bunched up down on the Delaware.
I like that
And they,
Nighthawk number.
oh, dude, we had so many. We had Nighthawks. They came. You can clear like that's a very good Nighthawk picture. They came.
Oh
They were
yeah.
coming right over
Yeah.
too. Um, yeah, here. So Aaron actually, while we're all screwing around, Aaron found the first Shorebird group at 650. Aaron Coolman. So it was like, all right, I guess we're doing this tonight. And as you can see, from 650 to 830, we had about 40-ish different flocks come through. And I guess these are all estimate numbers, but it's kind of like crowdsourced. We try to do as good as we can with it. You can see we had a 600 here. It was just a couple 600s, and kind of almost looks like abstract art, but I really like these flock pictures. You know, some look better than others. You know, I gave myself a 5 there. Um, um, but some of these are really cool looking. And you can just see like some of these are just massive numbers of birds. And this night too, they started very early and the first sets came through pretty high. So I almost wonder, we almost never get stuff before like 7:20, 7:30. So I almost wonder if these birds took off maybe from somewhere else further south. And they all seemed pretty high. So I wonder, we were thinking maybe they could have been from Virginia or North Carolina or somewhere. I'm not sure, but it was earlier and higher than we normally have birds in the evening, so that was interesting. But you can see some of these flocks are just crazy. And we had a lot of birds we can ID, which doesn't always happen. We had good number, and these obviously are all estimates, but we had whimbrel, we had black-bellied plover. Whimbrel, I think, was a county or state bird for everybody in the group that night. Can't quite tell just because of this, but the whimbrel were up here and they kind of, you can see they're starting to form the V right here. They were in this group as they came at us, and then they separated themselves out of the group while we were watching. So that was pretty neat. So like this ended like a minute later, this was a V of whimbrel, and I think this is like black-bellied plovers and knots for the most part, and they kind of all separated from them, which was really neat. And here's a group of knots. Like it's kind of, I don't know. I think it was really cool. We had a couple group of dunlin come through really low, and you can actually see the black bellies and stuff on these guys. The dunlin came through very low and nice light. So I actually like, without even parsing these too much, you can definitely tell those are dunlin. Yeah, it was pretty cool. And we actually, it was one of our best turnouts we've ever had. We had 15 of us on Monday. And we actually had like, I think 3 teenagers, which was nice because they all got really good eyes. It's like we had everybody was just scanning the whole time. It was a lot of fun. It was, and we ended up with a estimate, obviously, we ended up with 9,200 shorebirds, which you could go sit on the Delaware Bay for a couple hours and not have that many. Like, posted up at a good beach somewhere. Like it was incredible.